There is a specific kind of silence that lives in certain childhoods, not the peaceful kind, not the quiet of a house settling at night or rain tapping softly on glass. This is the silence that fills the space where a parent's voice should have been. The silence after you said something vulnerable and no one responded. The silence of a room that was full of people but somehow completely empty of warmth. You know the one. Maybe you grew up in a house where the lights were always on, but something essential was always off. Maybe meals happened, birthdays happened, school happened, and from the outside everything looked fine. But somewhere inside you, a small version of yourself was waiting. Just waiting for something that never quite came. That waiting never fully stopped. It just learned to hide. You learned to function. You learned to smile at the right moments, to make yourself smaller in rooms that felt dangerous, to read the energy of a space before you even crossed the threshold. You got good at it, remarkably good, and for a long time, you called that survival. You called it being perceptive. You called it being low maintenance, being independent, being fine. But here you are, and something in this video caught your attention, and that something is worth paying attention to, because the child who learned not to need anything grew into the adult who doesn't know how to ask for anything. And that is not strength. That is the oldest wound wearing the most convincing disguise. Take a breath here. Let that land for a moment before we keep going. You probably recognize yourself in small, specific ways that most people would miss. You are the person who apologizes when someone bumps into you. Not just a reflexive sorry, but something that carries actual weight, actual guilt, as if your existence in that space was already an imposition. You rehearse conversations before they happen, not because you are anxious exactly, but because you have learned that words have consequences, that moods are weather systems you are responsible for predicting, and that the wrong sentence at the wrong moment can cost you something. You give more than you receive, and you do not think of this as generosity. You think of this as fairness, because somewhere deep down, you believe that people only stay when you are useful, when you are easy, when you do not ask too much. You are extraordinarily attuned to other people's emotions. You can sense when someone is irritated before they have said a word. You can read a room the way other people read a book, cover to cover, picking up details that most people miss entirely. This is not a gift, or rather, it started as a necessity, and somewhere along the way, people mistook it for a gift. You find it genuinely difficult to receive care. When someone is kind to you without a clear reason, something in you gets uncomfortable. You look for the motive. You wait for the condition. You quietly brace for the moment when the warmth gets withdrawn. Because warmth, in your experience, has always been conditional. You just have not said that out loud yet. And you keep yourself busy, beautifully, impressively busy, because stillness is where the feeling lives. And you have not decided yet whether you are ready to feel it. Here is what happened. And here is why it makes complete sense that you are the way you are. When a child grows up in an environment where love is inconsistent, where affection appears and disappears without a predictable pattern, where care is given as reward and withheld as punishment, the child's nervous system does something very intelligent. It builds a system, a whole internal architecture designed to track the emotional availability of the people around them. The child learns to monitor, to manage, to preempt. Psychologists call this hypervigilance. But before that word means anything, understand what it felt like in the body. It felt like always being slightly on alert, like sleeping lightly even when nothing was wrong. Like scanning a parent's face the moment they walked through the door to know, before a word was spoken, what kind of evening this was going to be. That is not anxiety in the clinical sense. That is a child doing the only rational thing available, learning the rules of an unpredictable world. The tragedy is that this skill gets carried forward. The nervous system does not know the difference between then and now. It was trained on scarcity, and it keeps operating on scarcity, even when you are 34 years old in a safe apartment with people who genuinely care about you. The alarm system that saved you as a child cannot tell that the danger has passed. There is another layer here, and it requires sitting with something uncomfortable. Many of you who grew up feeling emotionally uncared for did not grow up in homes of obvious neglect. There were no dramatic events to point to. There was just a slow, steady, emotional inaccessibility. A parent who was physically present but emotionally somewhere else. A parent who worked too hard or drank too quietly or was too consumed by their own unhealed wounds to have anything left over for you. And because nothing that bad happened, you learn to doubt your own experience. You learn to minimize, to say, it wasn't that bad, they did their best, other people had it worse. That minimizing is its own wound. It is called invalidation. And when it comes from inside you, directed at yourself, it is arguably the most insidious kind. Pause here. Feel where you are right now. Notice if something tightened in your chest when you read those last few sentences. Now let's go one layer deeper. What happened in childhood did not just shape your behaviors. It shaped your internal working model, which is the psychological term for the unconscious story you carry about whether you are lovable, whether the world is safe, and whether other people can be trusted to stay. This model was built before you had words for it, before you could have possibly consented to it, and it runs underneath everything. It runs underneath the way you choose partners. You are drawn, often without understanding why, to relationships that feel familiar, not comfortable. Familiar. There is a difference. Familiar might feel like someone who runs hot and cold, who gives you their best self on some days and withdraws completely on others. Familiar might feel like having to earn affection, like never being quite sure where you stand. Familiar for you might feel like love. But here is the unexpected angle. You may also unconsciously avoid relationships that feel too steady, too available, too kind, because safety, real safety, is something your nervous system was never trained on. When someone offers it to you, something in you does not recognize it. It feels almost wrong, boring maybe, or suspicious. And so you pull away from the very thing you have been quietly aching for your entire life. This is the paradox that lives at the center of an unloved childhood. What kept you safe then is keeping you alone now. Not physically alone maybe, but alone in the way that counts. This also shows up in how you relate to your own sense of worth. You may be accomplished by any external measure. You may be respected, capable, someone others rely on. But underneath all of that, there lives a quiet, persistent question. A question that does not ask itself in words exactly. It is more of a feeling, a low hum, something like, but am I actually enough? Not for what I produce, not for what I provide, just as I am, with nothing to offer. Am I enough? And the honest answer, the one you have never been able to fully believe, is yes. But we are not ready for that answer yet, because the most honest moment in this whole conversation comes first. And it is this: you have been waiting your whole life for someone to see you. Not the version of you that performs, that achieves, that shows up reliably and never asks for too much. The real version. The one that is tired. The one that cries sometimes without knowing exactly why. The one that still flinches at raised voices. The one that sometimes, in quiet moments, feels like that small child again, standing in a room full of people, invisible. You have been waiting for permission to need something. No one ever gave you that permission, and so you never gave it to yourself. I spent so long making myself easy to love that I forgot to ask if I was being loved at all. That is the wound, right there. Not the childhood itself, as painful as it was, but the way it taught you that your needs were a burden, that wanting things was dangerous, that the safest version of you was the one who needed the least, and you have been living inside that conclusion ever since. Breathe. The question now is not how to undo what happened. You cannot. No one can. The question is what you do with the person it made you. And this is where something genuinely important begins. There is a process that trauma-informed therapists and depth psychologists sometimes call inner child work. It sounds perhaps a little soft, a little abstract, but strip away the language and here is what it actually describes. The part of you that was shaped by those early experiences, the part that still operates on old rules, still flinches at old shadows, still carries beliefs formed in a childhood that no longer exists. That part of you did not grow up the way the rest of you did. It got stuck in the amber of that moment, and it is still there, running its original programming, interpreting every new relationship and every new challenge through the lens of the old world. The move is not to silence that part. You have been silencing it for years. The move is to turn toward it, to notice it, to say with some gentleness, I see you. You were trying to keep us safe. You did the best you could with what you knew. That is not weakness. That is one of the hardest things a person can do, because what you learned as a child was that your emotional reality was not welcome, that needing things created problems, that being hurt, being scared, being sad was something to manage privately, if at all. So you became very good at not burdening others with your inner life. And now, as an adult, you do not know how to share it. Not because you cannot trust other people, but because you never fully learned to trust yourself, to believe that what you feel is real, is valid, is worth voicing. Self-compassion, as a practice, is not self-indulgence. Psychologist Kristen Neff describes it as treating yourself the way you would treat a good friend who is suffering. You would not tell a friend who grew up feeling unseen that they were being dramatic. You would not tell them to move on, to be grateful, to stop living in the past. You would sit with them. You would acknowledge that what they experienced was real and that it shaped them, and that they deserve to be gentle with themselves while they figure out who they want to be now. You deserve that from yourself. I am not trying to fix myself anymore. I am trying to understand myself. There is a difference. The path forward is not a prescribed series of steps. It is more of an orientation, a turning of the face. And the first turn is the hardest, giving yourself permission to admit that something was missing, not to blame, not to make your parents into villains, because most of them were simply people carrying their own unloved childhoods inside their own bodies, doing exactly what you are doing now, surviving. But to name it, to say, that was not enough. I needed more than I got. And it is okay that I carry marks from that. Naming is not the same as being trapped by. In fact, naming is often the only way to begin to loosen the grip. Let's come back to the beginning for a moment. That silence. That specific hollow silence of a childhood that was full of presence, but short on warmth. You have been trying to fill that silence ever since, with productivity, with achievement, with relationships, with constant motion, and it has not worked, not fully, because the silence was never about the absence of noise. It was about the absence of being truly known. truly held, not fixed, not improved, not managed, just held. And here is what quietly, slowly, gradually becomes possible. You can begin to offer some of that to yourself, not as a replacement for what you needed then and deserved then. There is no replacing it, but as a new foundation, a new story, one you write yourself, with full knowledge of where you came from and full ownership of where you choose to go. This does not happen in a single moment. It does not happen in a video or a book or even in a years-long practice. It happens in the small, unglamorous accumulation of moments where you choose to treat yourself differently. The moment you catch yourself apologizing for existing and pause. The moment you feel someone's kindness and instead of deflecting, you let it land for just 1 second longer than you normally would. The moment you feel that low hum of "am I enough?" and you do not rush to prove yourself. You just sit with the question, with some softness, without needing to answer it immediately. Maybe I was never broken. Maybe I was just a child who needed more than they were given, and a person who has been quietly rebuilding ever since. There will be days when the old patterns come back with full force. Days when you shrink yourself automatically, when you overgive until there is nothing left, when you look at someone who loves you and feel certain, absolutely certain, that it is only a matter of time before they leave. Those days do not mean you are failing. They mean you are human. They mean the wound was real and deep, and the healing is not linear. Healing is never linear. That is not a consolation. It is simply the truth. What you are learning, slowly and on your own timeline, is that you are allowed to take up space, not because you have earned it, not because you have proven your worth through productivity or kindness or being easy to be around, simply because you are here, because you exist, because existence, yours included, does not require justification. That is a sentence that probably feels true and impossible at the same time. Hold both, the truth and the impossibility. That is where the real work lives, not in the resolution, but in the staying with both things at once. You may never fully outgrow the patterns that childhood built in you. Some of them are in your nervous system, not just your mind, and they move faster than thought. But you can build something alongside them, a newer understanding, a kinder narrator inside your own head, a capacity to notice the old story without being entirely written by it. The child who learned to make themselves invisible to stay safe does not need to be eliminated. They need to be understood. They need to hear that the world is bigger now, that there is more space now, that not every room is as dangerous as the one they learned to survive in. You were not too much. You were in a space that was too small, and maybe that is the quiet revolution available to you, not the dramatic transformation, not the overnight healing, not the single insight that changes everything. Just the slow, steady, courageous act of taking up a little more space, asking for a little more than you think you deserve, letting someone's warmth reach you a little further before you deflect it, just a little more, just a little further, every time. That silence from the beginning, the hollow one, the one that lives in certain childhoods and then gets carried forward into adult life, like an old coat you forgot you were still wearing. That silence does not have to be the last word, because you are here. You are asking the question. You are sitting with the discomfort instead of scrolling past it. And that is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. The child who waited in the quiet for someone to notice them did not wait in vain, because you are here now, and you are starting to notice yourself. That is where it begins. Not with someone finally arriving to save you, with you, quietly, turning toward the light you have been carrying inside you all along, the one that never went out, even when no one thought to look for it.